Hello and welcome. I am so excited for today's conversation. I have got the beautiful and amazing and wonderful Megan Hale with us today. Megan Hale has shown me so much about what it means to be a CEO of my business. And I'm so appreciative that she is here today to share some of her wisdom and insight when it comes to self-mastery and how that supports our business. So welcome, Megan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, lady. I am so honored.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, what do you do? Who are you? Who is Megan Hale?
I feel like lately when I've been on interviews, like this question comes up and it's like, this feels so expansive of like such a big question. Who are you?
Right?
What do you do in the world? Because I mean, basically like on, I think a macro level, I'm like really helping people step into their fullest expression, right? But I think that the way that I do that is really helping them create a business that supports them in doing that. So that's really, really fun. And the thing that I love most about what I do is really helping people create a custom business. So it's really tailored to who they are, who they want to be, who they're here to help, and all of those things, and really pulling together all of their wisdom and experience into a comprehensive business model that it feels like this is finally me. Like it finally fits who I am, right?
I can vouch for that.
Yes. So that's what's super fun. And that's what I do. Like in my work life, I'm also a mama to two little boys. They are 2 and 4, and I'm a military spouse. So we typically move around a lot, but where we're living now, we just moved here in August. We're living in Omaha, Nebraska. We'll probably be here for like 4 or 5 years, which is like 9 million years in military life. So that's basically me in a nutshell.
Nice. I love it. I love it. And so who have been some of the biggest influencers in your life? Like, how did you get here?
Goodness, that's a big question. So my journey, like my professional journey, I think started when I was 15 years old, and I sat in my first psychology class. At the time, I was depressed and I was anxious, but I didn't know that that's what was going on. I didn't know there were terms or names for what I was experiencing. I just knew that it was really hard for me to be myself, and I felt like I was trying to be who others wanted me to be. There was a lot of pressure. I didn't know how to like feel my feeling, like none of those things. And I remember sitting in my first Psych 101 class in high school and learning about some of these like theorists of like explaining the inner psyche, right? And like learning about Jung and Freud and Skinner. And I was literally mesmerized of like, oh my gosh, there's people who study why we are the way we are and why we feel the way we feel. And from that moment on, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I am here to understand myself and understand other people and help them understand themselves to live a happier life. And so that was the beginning. And like, that's literally my life path. I went from 15 all the way to, 23 through undergrad, like majored in psychology, and then took the next step to grad school. I got a graduate degree in counseling and got licensed as a clinical therapist, opened my practice. And because at 15, I started going to therapy for the first time. And I remember sitting in that therapist's office, just so much healing taking place. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. So coupled with the class, coupled with my first experience with therapy, I'm like, this is me. And so I went and made that dream come true. And then I started getting that feeling that this isn't all that there is for me, which was a very unsettling time. And all of my colleagues thought that I was completely nuts to be considering anything else, right?
I'm going to go start an online coaching business.
Yeah, they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, I just know that I'm here to have a bigger voice. And I think that that was one of the things that was really hard in the therapy field is that there's a lot of restrictions on how much of yourself that you can share. And I had just gone through such a deep personal journey in my own life that it just felt like the wisdom that I've accumulated, it needs a space and it needs a voice. And that's really when I found coaching and I was like, we're doing this.
I love that. And I love that you followed the pull to go and share your wisdom in a deeper and bigger way. And I think that that's really important when it comes to, expansion. Human beings are designed for expansion. And we think that we should do the thing that everybody tells us we should do. If we're just going with that pull, it leads us to so many amazing things.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I think the hardest part about that is when you put in so many years to get somewhere. That was a long journey. I mean, that was from the time I was 15 to I became licensed when I was 27, right? The other should that shows up is that this should be enough and you should be content and you should be grateful and you should be happy and all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of made, like for me at the time, which was prior to entrepreneurship, knowing that was like the best self-mastery tool there was, right?
Right.
But at the time, I remember like thinking, it's like, there's just something about this that just is not me. And having to honor that and not knowing what anything beyond that looked like. Like it was a huge risk, a huge leap, a huge place of like, I'm just going to do it and see.
Yeah. And that trust and that knowing is another level of self-mastery too. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yes. I mean, talk about like just trusting your intuition, right? Of like not needing to know the how or where this is going. Because I think a lot of times, especially earlier on in the spiritual journey, when we're starting to trust our intuition, our intuition sees so much more than we can see. And so if we try to approach our intuition from that place of logic, the thing that our intuition is asking us to do is like usually highly illogical, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like learning how to kind of lead your life from a place of curiosity and uncertainty.
Yeah, I love that you say that because when in working with you, one of the things that happened back in December was I had this plan to work like tooth and bone for 2 weeks straight, just go, go, go and get the things done. And then in my work with you, I was like, I can do nothing but stare at the wall right now. And this makes no sense because I'm the one who gets shit done. And I'm like, Megan, what the hell is going on? And then it turns out 2 weeks later, I download my entire business model and it made no sense until that day.
Yep.
And then that day I was like, oh, the sandbox for the intuition to play in. I get it now.
It's like one of my favorite stories of ours because I remember there was like, because anytime we're like being asked to move at a different pace than we're used to or different cadence, there's all of these stories that come up of like, but we have to do it this way in order to get there, right? And your intuition's like, actually, I'm going to show you a different way. I'm actually going to show you like that there's an even easier way to do this. And you literally can just sit there and stare at a wall. And you're like, how is this going to work out? And your intuition's like, trust me, I got this.
Right.
And like for 2 weeks, you're like, are you sure you got this? Because like, nothing else is coming. And then sure enough, right?
Yeah. Every morning you just wake up and go, okay.
Yes.
I love it.
Think your trust though, and like the creative process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what does self-mastery mean to you?
I was thinking about some of the questions that you might ask me, and I had a feeling that this might be one of them. And the thing that came up is that self-mastery to me is being able to face every single part of myself and stay in the room.
I love that you say that because we were just talking about this before we jumped on to this recording. And for those of you, of the listeners who don't know, I had to put my dog down last week. And in that, I knew that thanks to Megan and giving me CEO space, I was able to take a week off, but I was also able to show up and be in the room. So I love that you bring that up. And I think that it's something that's really important, that even when it seems like shitty things are happening, even when we're going through some of the worst grief of our entire lives, we can still sit with it and be in the room. So I love that you bring that up.
Yeah. And there's so many gifts that come when we can sit in like the hard rooms, right? Because I think and like you and I have such similar histories with addiction and like numbing out and checking out, which is like the polar opposite of staying in the room. Like something hard comes up, you're like, peace, see you later.
Come out.
And so like that was like a very, very long journey of mine of like learning how to not do that. Learning how to not numb, learning how to not check out, learning that I could feel an emotion and not get lost inside of it, because I had such a huge fear for so long that if I were to feel and to sit still long enough, that I would like literally drown, because my emotions would be that overwhelming and that powerful, right? And it was only by learning to sit still and be in the room and not check out and to not numb that I realized that's not how emotions work, right? Like I am the vessel for them.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is that we have this perception that it's bad to feel sad, and that we need to numb it with prescription drugs or alcohol or street drugs or whatever it is, and we just feel like it's bad to feel that way, and so we shove it under the carpet and pretend it doesn't exist. And unfortunately, society has taught us that that's the way to do it.
Oh yeah.
And self-mastery is that level of, it's easy to sit in the room when you're happy.
Sure.
But all of you is at the table. That's your term, at the table.
Yes. And I'm so glad that you bring that up, because, one of the things we talk about in the CEO-ship of like the energetic flow of a launch, like when we're putting our work out there in the world, is that we have this lull, which is kind of like my, oh shit day. Like everything just kind of like gets really, really intense. Everything's going really well. And then it doesn't, it plateaus, it stops, like the cadence slows down. And in that moment, it's like, that's when all of the hard emotions rush in, right? And I remember this is like a launch, maybe like last year or 2 years ago, I was sitting on the couch and crying, right? And my husband's sitting next to me and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I gotta feel this. It's like so important for the process that I feel this," right? And like, he's like, "This feels like very, like masochistic," right? And I'm like, "It's necessary."
Yeah.
But just being willing to like, that's what sitting in the room is, of like being present to what is there.
Yes, absolutely. And just acknowledging it. I always think of emotions as these little 5-year-olds that are like just desperate for your attention. And they're screaming, "Mom, mom, mommy." And if you would just turn around and give that sadness a little hug, then the 5-year-old would be happy and go off and play again.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and I think like inner child work is so crucial here too, but it also like something else that happens when we can see hard emotions that way is it helps us to get a little bit of a distance from them, right? Because I think that it's so easy for us to personalize our emotions and like this is me, this is me. It's like, well, this is a part of you.
Yes.
Right. And there's so many different parts of all of us. And so when we can kind of see it's like, this is this one facet of me that really needs some love and attention and reassurance right now. Or maybe it's like that little part of you has some fear that is really important for us to tune into, of like, oh, wait, did I miss something? Right. And so I think it's really important not to discredit our emotions and our feelings as they're coming up.
Yeah.
The more we can stay present to them, I think the more integrated and whole we become as a person. But also as we're continuing to move through life, we are very, very present and super wise of how we're moving forward, because we have sat at our full table, right? Like, how's this feel for you? How does this feel for you? Are we all on board, right?
Right. Yeah. Asking everybody, are we all good here?
Yes.
I love that. So what happens if you don't practice self-mastery?
Let me think about that. I guess for me, so I have to first identify what does not practicing look like for me. So I think for me, not practicing self-mastery is like moving more so off of autopilot, right? So I'm not really checking in. I'm just moving forward with plans that I set at a certain time frame and never recheck back in with them. And I think for me, what happens when I am not practicing self-mastery is that I get into this forcing energy where I am very like way too attached to an idea, a plan, a timeline, an outcome. And that can create a lot of suffering.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, a lot.
And so that's what happens when I'm not practicing those tools. And so anytime I feel that emotion of like I'm forcing something, proving something, getting into that hustling energy, because for me, self-mastery is like the foundation of like being enough, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing to prove. There's not like I'm already there.
Mm-hmm.
So when I feel that energy coming through, that's when I know that I'm not with my tools. And that's like, it's just not a good place for any of us. Like, I know we all know what that feels like, right?
Oh, we know. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the worst. I hate it.
Well, I think that ties everything together here that we're talking about too, is when I always tell my clients that, you can make a plan, but the plan's going to change because your intuition is in play. And so the intuition is working in the background, and you wake up one morning and you're like, wait, no, that plan's not going to work. But if you're not practicing a level of self-mastery and checking in with yourself all day, every day, then you start, your ego, your mind gets attached to that plan. And instead of checking in with the intuition and listening to what's going on, then we get into that hustle mode instead of shifting and adjusting the plan.
Mhm.
And if we are practicing that level of self-mastery, then we're checking in and we're adjusting the plan, not being attached to what that should look like.
Yeah. I mean, and let's just be honest, like a lot of this involves a lot of surrender, which for me, I call a 4-letter word. I have never in my life met a person who's like, MO is like, yeah, we'll just surrender, easy peasy. Like if you've met a human that way, please, I want to meet them because I've worked with hundreds of people at this point. And surrender is one of the most difficult things for us to do because it requires a lot of faith and a lot of trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
So also some can be 4-letter words, like they are very difficult for us to master.
Yes.
But I think the other thing is really starting to learn how your intuition speaks to you. Cause I think that it shows up differently for all of us, right? Like for me, it shows up in my body. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel when something is off.
Mm-hmm.
It feels heavy. It feels constricted. I just feel like anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I know it's like, whoa, something's off kilter a little bit. I got to tune in.
Yeah. I always like to say that if it feels hard, then something's off. Whether it feels hard or heavy in your body or in your mind, or it's just not working, you're not seeing the results, whatever that looks like. If it feels hard, then you're not in tune with your intuition.
I agree. And there's got to be an easier way.
There's always an easier way.
Mm-hmm.
We just like to hang on to the hard way.
Why? Like it's almost like, what is happening here? Why are we doing this?
Humans are funny.
We are funny. So funny, right?
Yeah. So in that conversation, let's talk about the difference between self-mastery and self-dominance. Because I think this ties in when we get attached to an outcome, we try to force it. And so I even think about this for myself, going to the gym. I've had a struggle my whole life for going to the gym, probably because one of my top values is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the gym doesn't feel free to me. And so when I was struggling with that and it felt hard, I would try to dominate my body and force it to go when it didn't want to go. And I think in that, finding that level of self-mastery, now I've found ways of moving my body that don't feel forced. So I want to just talk about that difference for a minute.
So I think that in my experience, high achievers, they tend to be more like dominating people, right? We make the plan, we make the rigid rules, we make the expectations. We create the schedule that needs to be adhered to perfectly, by the way. Okay. So there's a lot of perfection that shows up in self-dominance.
Yes.
Let's just be real about that part. I think that's important. And so I think that for me, man, I've lived so many years from that place. It's coming from a place of should. Mm-hmm. And it's a very rigid idea of what something should look like. And this can even show up from a spiritual practice place, right? When we get really rigid about our spiritual practice and we don't give ourselves permission to kind of flow with what feels good in the moment. And I think the reason that this exists is because there's a fear of missing out or a fear of screwing up if we go outside of the lines.
Right? I should be meditating right now. But what if you just went and sat outside for a little bit?
Yeah, like there's not just one way to do things, right? And so really kind of giving yourself flexibility of holding on to the purpose of something. Mm-hmm. So if the purpose is to get into a clear, calm state, meditation is one way to get there, right? So is going for a walk outside. So is taking a nap. There's lots of different ways for us to get there. Absolutely. I think what's most important is that we tune into what we're needing and the purpose behind that, right? And how we get there can be flexible.
And it really comes down to just pausing for a moment and listening. What do I need right now?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's also like redefining what consistency looks like. Like that has been so huge in my journey. I used to think if I didn't do everything, like one certain thing every single day, then I had screwed up and I had totally failed. So you see a lot of black and white thinking, right?
Yeah.
If it's not perfect, then it's no good at all.
Right? That sounds like self-dominance to me.
Yes. And so it's taken, a long time to kind of give myself permission to redefine what consistency is for me. And for me, it's more times than not.
Absolutely.
Is so much more freeing.
Right? Yes. It's so much more freeing to be imperfect.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I just want to touch base. We've got a comment from one of our listeners. Why is it so much easier to feel negative perceived emotions? I think that's us wanting to take the hard way.
So I think so from my perspective, I think that comes down to perception. We're much more likely to notice a negative emotion than we are to necessarily notice a positive one. So especially if we have like past experiences that have created some sort of reward internally for feeling the negative emotion. So now it's like we're primed to notice it more readily. And so this showed up for me, especially like unraveling stories around shame and not enoughness and feelings of self-doubt and all of those things. It was like I was so much more keen to notice when those things were showed up, because it was almost like I had a story in my mind of like, see, I told you so.
You're expecting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now it's like when you rewire that, which is no short process, right? Like I usually tell my clients, it's like learning to rewire something is like, I want you to imagine that you grew up with your best friend. There were woods in between your houses and y'all would fly through that trail like over and over and over again as little kids, right? Like you could walk it blindfolded, like it was super easy. When we're trying to rewire something, it's like we're actually intentionally not going down that trail. And we have to forge this whole new path through the woods and like cutting back branches and cutting down trees. And it is a lot of work. And you're looking at that clear trail of like, whew, looks like easier over there, right?
Easier, yeah. But it's not easier. That's the thing.
Right. Because it doesn't get you where you want to go. And, if you go back down that path, you'll notice like there's all these like, there's shame on that path that you have to walk by every single day. There's self-doubt, there's insecurity, like all of those things. And so if you put in the work to cut the new path, it's going to feel hard at first, but eventually it becomes your new normal. And then when you find yourself on that old path, you're like, oh, wait, like, what am I doing over here? This isn't the way that I want to go there. Yes. And so that's why I think it's so important to like pay attention to the stories and what the expectation is. You're expecting it to show up. Of course they're here, right? I told you so.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important that we bring up that piece that it takes work to get there. Because society has taught us just cover it with a pill or go numb it somehow instead of facing it. And facing it is the hardest piece of being willing to acknowledge that I feel like shit right now and being willing to sit with that. It's not easy. And I think that society has trained us to just kind of brush it off, not really look at it.
Or it's the fix it mentality, right?
Yeah, the instant gratification.
But even like with negative emotions, especially, it's like, well, we need to fix this. This is not okay to feel this way. So we have to fix it. And I see this show up even with healers, right? Somebody comes into a space and they're carrying negative emotion and the healer's like, how can I help this? How can I change this? How can I remove this for you so you feel better? And that's our job, is to simply hold the space of like, yeah, this sucks right now. This is hard, right? This is part of being human. And we don't have to fix this. We actually just need to be present for it.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up, because if all of those emotions are meant to be at your table, there's nothing wrong and you're not broken.
Right.
There's nothing to fix.
Yes. And so I think that kind of an aside to that is when we have shame and self-doubt and insecurity, things that feel heavy, right? Trauma. If our table feels like it's a little out of balance, right? Like those things are taking up a lot more space at that table. then joy, love, acceptance, possibility, right?
Yeah.
Our job is not to remove those things from our table.
No.
It's to restore more balance, right? So how can we start creating more space for joy and love and acceptance and possibility? Like, that's the work. And I think a lot of times, and I'll speak from my own journey, I spent so much time trying to minimize these. And then I'll say, then I'll grow those.
Right?
Right? And I didn't realize that there's a difference of like, let me focus on growing these. And these will actually minimize.
Yes. It's where our focus goes. If you're focused on the perceived negative, then that grows really. But if we focus on calling in more, and I've noticed that in the past week in going through deep grief, there's been pockets where I've had explosive joy.
Oh, yeah.
And creativity and excitement. And then I'm sad again. And that's okay because I can balance those out and play with both. It does feel a little bit like what you called a ping pong machine,
Yeah.
but because I've done the work and I've sat with this for years and understanding that all of those emotions are okay and they are a part of who I am.
Yeah. And I think that's a benefit of doing a lot of inner work, right? Around self-mastery in particular, because we start to create a distance from our emotions. Like, we can be in our emotion and we can also step out of it and observe it.
Yes.
And that is a very, very powerful tool, especially going through something as grief is, right? Grief is so multidimensional that if without that distance, it kind of feels like we are that pinball and we're just getting bounced around through life, right?
Yeah.
When we can step back from it, we can observe it. Of saying, oh, look, 2 hours ago, I was like so incredibly grateful for this deep love and relationship that I have had the pleasure of experiencing in my life, right?
Yeah.
And now I am completely heartbroken and devastated that experience is no longer going to be the same, right?
Yeah.
And I think that distance is just, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, rather than, and I like to say, often I say to my clients, you're not sad, you're experiencing a moment of sadness. You're not happy, you're experiencing a moment of happiness.
Yes.
Because all of those emotions are part of who we are. So we can't just be one of them, we are all of them.
Yes.
But we experience moments of each.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Megan, I want to thank you so much for being here and being part of my expansion back onto the online world. I've been off for a week, so thank you for that. I want to end the conversation with one last question because you asked me this question and I felt it was so powerful. So I'm going to spin it around on you. Megan, what do you dream of for the world?
Oh, man. I dream of women coming more into their power and self-trust in themselves to really know, like on a deep level, the magic that they bring and how incredibly valuable that it is.
Oh, goosebumps. So good.
I know. And I get to like sit here and look at that right here, like demonstrated in you. So thank you.
Thank you. And I also love that, I connect with so many leaders in the online space and connect with so many people who are making a difference in the world and creating impact. And I find that I resonate the most with those who share a similar dream. And my dream for the world is that everybody understands their own limitless potential and understands their own divinity. And so you and I coming together in this space and sharing a very similar dream, it just creates this ripple effect. And I'm so grateful for you to be here.
Me too.
Thank you.